And here we go.
Welcome to the Great Work Insights Podcast by the O.C. Tanner Institute, the show that features the people, the professionals, the thought leaders, and the coolest companies. And now your host, the man navigating the discussion about the culture, the organized chaos, and the best practices that compel great work, Todd Nordstrom.
Let's talk about job security and if there actually is such a thing. Many of you listening right now might have some horror stories to tell from 2008, 2009, or other years when you were forced out of your company, be it a recession or some other reason, layoffs, that kind of thing. Maybe you were the person who lost your job, or maybe you were one who didn't lose your job, but you were the person who had to look somebody else in the face and say, "I'm sorry, we have to let you go." I can't help but think about the meaning of the word security. I've actually been on both sides of the layoff desk at some point in my career. And, honestly, neither side feels good. Yet, although almost all of us have either been laid off, knew someone who was laid off, or had to be the bearer of bad news, for some reason, our culture still likes to believe in the notion of job security. Is it real? Is it possible? And bigger question is there anything we can do about it? Today our guest is visiting for the second time and has some insights that might change the way you view the word security, whether you're a manager, an employee, or an entrepreneur. Recognized as a media dynamo, Nely Galán is an Emmy award-winning producer of more than 600 episodes of television in both Spanish and English. Her career includes stints in print journalism as an on-air correspondent for CBS and E! Entertainment. After developing cable channels with custom programming throughout South America for such clients as HBO, ESPN, and Fox, Galán became the first Latina president of a television network in the United States you might recognize as Telemundo. Galán also created and was executive producer of the Fox reality series The Swan, which earned an average 10 million viewers per show. In addition to all of this, Nely Galán owns a real estate investment company called Santa Clara. She holds a doctorate degree in clinical psychology, and she is the author of a brand new book titled Selfmade, Becoming Empowered, Self-Reliant, and Rich in Every Way. That's a long list of achievements. Nely, welcome back to the show.
Todd, so happy to be back with you, and we always have a great conversation, so I'm happy to be here.
I'm catching my breath after reading your resume, so give me 1 second. Nely, I interviewed you about a year or two ago on this show, and your stories are absolutely fascinating about how you became the person you are today. And I highly recommend listeners go listen to the last time you were on the show, because we go way back into your life, and it's great stuff. We'll add a link here to this post. But today I want to focus on a concept of job security. I want to talk about it in a time right now where, quite frankly, we're not hearing too many stories of massive layoffs. Listeners may hear me rattle off things like your resume and assume that you've never dealt with a lack of security, and our economy right now is not a place where there's low security, but it still doesn't necessarily mean there's security. I know that a big part of your new book, Selfmade, was inspired by a false sense of security. Talk about that.
Well, I think, there's a whole chapter in the book called Kill Prince Charming. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, that this concept we have in America, we're in a first world country, and we're a bit entitled. We think we're always going to be taken care of. And I don't think it's just women, it's men as well. We think somebody's going to save us, whether it's a mate, whether it's a corporation, whether it's the government. And it's just really not true. I think that, whether you're going through a good patch in the economy or not, we are dealing with bigger forces than here. I mean, we see what's going on in our government right now, mm-hmm. and the craziness that's going on. And we see that corporations are being disrupted on a daily basis. So they're going through stuff. So for us to think that we are sitting here waiting to be saved by somebody and be taken care of being taken care of for life by somebody is just very unrealistic. I learned that, when I was 25 years old. I was running a little rinky-dinky TV station, which is now Telemundo, but back then it was an independent station, killing myself 7 days a week. And the owners, I barely saw them. And one day I got to work and they had sold the company to an insurance company. And I was out of a job. And in that moment, I realized I was out on the street and I thought this is never going to happen to me again. And I realized that at 25 years of age, I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have a family, and that this was the moment for me to try to go get my own chips. The boss says to me, "Young lady, these are my chips. Go get your own chips." And I thought, I was mad at him, but he was really telling me the truth. And I think that was the greatest moment of my life, because out of anger, that anger propelled me to have a bigger vision for my life. And it's a vision I've never turned back on.
Well, it's interesting too, because you got laid off basically because had nothing to do with a recession or a bad economy.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it was a good time for the organization, right?
Yeah, that's correct. They had sold the company. They had made a lot of money. And, and I just simply thought, I can't go through this pain again. It was more like, it wasn't a financial move. It was a pain move, because I really was very invested in that job. And I think I did the right thing, because by thinking like an owner, I always thought like an owner. I think I was really prepared I realized on someone else's dime, I had learned to do it. I could do it again. And I think that because I'm an immigrant, Todd, and you and I've talked about this a lot, immigrants have a real advantage, because we come from other countries where bad things have happened. Mm-hmm. My parents came from communist Cuba, and from one day to the next, we had to leave our country with the shirt on our backs. That was it. And so I think here we really don't think that stuff could happen, but in fact it could. It almost did in 2008. Mm-hmm. And so I think thinking like an owner, whether you actually go and become an entrepreneur or not, is very important. And also, I just think we live in times where being an entrepreneur is not so grandiose as it used to be. You're not leaving everything and starting. You don't necessarily have to go start a brick and mortar company. You can actually have a side hustle, and while you have a job, experiment with things anonymously online and see if you've got what it takes. I think that's the key message.
Well, and I like the idea of ownership. And when you talk about ownership, because even a lot of the listeners right now, they're working for large organizations. Maybe they've been an employee all their life, a manager, what have you, and they're moving up the corporate ladder. And when you say the word entrepreneur to them, they might get, whoa, hold on, I can't quit what I'm doing. But so talk about this concept of ownership. If I'm in a job, if I'm an employee, what does that mean to me?
Well, I think, first of all, let's talk about the word entrepreneur, because it is kind of like a word that gives people the heebie-jeebies, right? It would give me the heebie-jeebies. There's a reason why the book is called Selfmade, because I think when you think of yourself as self-made, the connotation is you're working on yourself from the inside out. And I think that's a really accurate, description. Mm-hmm. I think becoming self-made is a mindset shift. It's kind of like, I'm working towards something, whether it's 1 hour a week, whether it's part-time, whether it's in my job thinking this way, that thinks like an owner. And an owner means that you really care, that you really watch where the money's being spent, whether it's yours or someone else's, and that you're observant about where are the holes. What is the problem that hasn't been solved, yours or someone else's? Because that's the self-made mindset. It's kind of like, wow, this is like a duh thing. There's something out there that's under my nose that hasn't been solved in society, and I can solve it. And I don't have to solve it tomorrow. I can solve it 1 hour a week. And oftentimes, and I say this in my book, Todd, oftentimes it comes from your pain. People say this in a lot of different ways, but it's kind of the worst things that have happened to you that you tend to sweep under the rug is the answer to the problem you need to solve.
That's interesting. Yeah, give an example. Give an example of that.
Well, I'll give my own example. So, I think, I was the president of Telemundo, and I've made 700 TV shows. Some of them are about Latinos, and some of them are about women. And all of them have come from my painful experiences as the kid of immigrants, or my painful experiences in a breakup, or my painful experiences gaining weight or aging. I take my pain and turn it into profit. And I think that is what I've seen traveling the country, meeting so many entrepreneurs and so many self-made people, the ones that really do transcendent work. I'm not saying you can't just be mathematical and come up with an idea and make money. I mean, I meet those kind of people all the time too. But when your idea becomes like a wow, like look at Joy Magnano. I mean, the movie Joy. I mean, she made all this money off of a mop. She really needed the perfect mop in her life. She was really going through a lot, and so I think it's often under our nose. And I really try to teach my son these skills as a young person, because it's really so clear to me that more than what they're teaching in school, these are the kind of things that we need to teach all kids, which is you're on this earth to solve a problem. And you may have to fail 300 times, and you might have 300 problems, and they may not be the right one, but one of those problems is gonna make you a self-made person.
Yeah, it's a fascinating
so many ways
too. Yeah, that's great, because if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're thinking, what are my pain points, your personal pain points? There's a bunch of other people who are also dealing with those and saying, I need a solution too. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I say this a lot to multicultural people and people of color, and we have like obvious pains, right? But a lot of women say to me, well, I'm a white woman from Pasadena. What's my pain? And I say, well, my husband is a white guy from Pasadena. And, growing up in country clubs and in things that the expectations of you are different. You don't think of that as your pain, but it is, because you grow up in a box where you're expected to be X, Y, or Z. Whereas maybe a minority person has parents that are struggling. And if you just go make money as a plumber, they're happy. You don't have any expectations on you. Everybody has pain. People that are raised with rich parents, with white parents, with Protestant parents are to have just as much pain as, an African American's kid who, grows up with no money. It's just a different kind of pain. And who are we to judge what that pain is? But in all those pains, there is profit in all of them, because you are an expert in the market that you have the pain in, and you can serve that market, and that's your starting point.
Let's talk about your brand new book here. Tell the audience a little bit about Selfmade, which I've noticed you're already getting a lot of attention. It publishes this month, which is fantastic. Congratulations!
Thank you so much, and I have to thank you, Todd, because you helped me so much. In the beginning of this book, really helped me focus on what the stories were and what the book was about. And I don't think I could have gotten here, and you'll see all the things I wrote about you in the book, because you were really a help, and I so appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And for listeners, what Nely's referring to is a lot of our conversation the last time you were on the show. So again, go listen to that the last time Nely was on, because her stories will blow your mind. But let's go back to the book, Selfmade. Who is it for?
Well, I really focused on women, but everyone, I would say that men often come to my speeches, and the book is completely, accessible to men. The reason I wrote it for women is because we are going through a new revolution and a new women's movement, if you will, around money and entrepreneurship. And it's being led by multicultural women in the United States and by emerging women in emerging countries around the world. And the reason that it's really a multicultural women's movement and an emerging movement is because after the 2008 crash, those women were most in need. Their husbands and fathers had lost their jobs, and they had to step it up. And I feel like it's a moment in time that I'm taking a snapshot of. I did not create this movement, but I'm naming it. And the reason I'm naming it is because having gone around the country for 4 years, I realized that these women did not at all relate to the word entrepreneur. These women were women that were scruffy, that were still in jobs and starting these businesses on the side, many of them in the digital age and in the shared economy market. And I think it's united all women because, in the United States, multiculturals are about to become the majority in the country. So no business is going to make it without those people and without that market. Mm-hmm. So I see it as all women are united now in this quest for an economic future they can control. And the new next phase of the women's movement is about self-reliance economically. And not only do I say that, I show you how to do it. I show women and all people what are the barriers in your mind that don't allow you to become fully self-made. And then where is all the hidden money in America that we're not applying for? Government contracts, contests, which are free money, and corporations outsource most of their business to entrepreneurs. How are we not applying for that?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the readers of your book, I want to go back to this because I think that a lot of listeners are probably still struggling with this concept of when you say self-made, you're not telling people to quit their jobs, are you?
No.
So the reader of your book will learn it's not how to quit your job, right?
No. It's how to think like an owner and start becoming self-made 1 hour a week. That's the starting point.
I love that.
How to do that. It's not grandiose. I say it over and over again. Becoming self-made is not a grandiose feat in this day and age. It's not a big, dramatic life decision. It's baby steps that lead you to something much greater. It's a mindset shift. And the mindset shift is thinking like an owner.
And that takes time, right? And that's what you're saying. Start small. I mean, you're actually telling people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about this learning process before. Talk about that learning process of starting small and understanding that you're in charge and talk about that ownership learning process.
Well, I think let me give you an analogy that I think would help.
Okay.
Like a lot of us have kids, right? And the kids don't always love school and and they have problems completing things often. And I say, start small. Like, take your kid to learn to scuba dive and get a little certification, or to, if you want to try something, go take the test to be a notary public, or when kids get to the age where they take the driving test. I think it's very important for the human mind to complete things before you think bigger. But completing little things really, really allows you to think that it's possible to do bigger things. So I think, entrepreneurship and becoming self-made is very similar. When you think about, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to open up my own restaurant, that feels so kind of unrealistic that most people just can't even go there, right? But if you say to yourself, I'm going to clean out my garage and I'm going to get rid of tools on Amazon. Or for a woman, I have all these shoes I don't use anymore. They don't fit, or my clothes don't fit. And I'm going to sell one item of clothing a week on Amazon. And I'm going to see how it goes. It becomes so easy. And you go, wow, I just made $200 this weekend. And you start putting that money away like it doesn't exist. And you start feeling very confident because you start then getting really competitive. Like, oh my God, somebody else is selling the same thing I'm selling and they're charging less money. It's a muscle. I think this whole process is akin to working out. We didn't know 20 years ago that we needed to work out. And then people, and the Richard Simmons of the world would say, don't think of it as some big grandiose thing. Just go take a walk for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you like it, the next day you walk 11 minutes. And I'm saying the same thing. It's not grandiose. It's kind of like, think of it as like, this is my hobby. I'm going to have a hobby where I think like an owner 1 hour a week. And just don't think beyond that. Start there. It may resonate with you. It may not resonate with you. But the reason that I think it's also very exciting is because I think people also think of entrepreneurship as something where you leave your job and you have to invent a business.
Yeah.
You know, like the Spanx lady that invented. Well, that's like the big ego, type A, 1% of entrepreneurs. The truth is, there's many ways to become an entrepreneur where it's much easier than that, like buying a franchise. Cookie cutter, you save up enough money, you go and buy a franchise, and you follow, a lot of other people with something that color by number is going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Or you could live in a neighborhood and you're a really organized person. You're not a creative person that's going to invent a business. And maybe your neighbor is 80 years old and selling their little corner store that you could take over and you can just make it more organized. Mm-hmm. I don't think every type of entrepreneurship is about, it's like saying I'm a movie director. Not everybody's that big a personality that invents things. And so I think that this baby step approach starts slowly showing you what you're good at and what you like, and seeing if it resonates with you, seeing if that feels like part of you, of who you are, regardless whether you decide to be a full-time entrepreneur or not. To do this on the side prepares you for all the possible things that could go wrong in your life, so you don't feel desperate that you got laid off for something and you don't know what to do. You'll have a side hustle that you'll turn into something bigger if you need to.
I love that, because you're teaching people that it's okay to make money too. And you were talking about emptying your shoe closet. You have one of my favorite quotes.
Yes.
Tell the listeners about your shoe quote.
I always say, don't buy shoes, buy buildings.
Why?
Because I think I say it as a literal thing and also as a metaphorical thing, because I think women, we tend to make ourselves happy when we're disappointed by buying things like, jewelry and makeup and shoes. And then it's just like, I wrote in the book, it's just like Sex and the City, Carrie ends up having to buy an apartment and she has no collateral. And, the bank, she says to the bank, but I have 1,000 Jimmy shoes and Louboutins. And they go, well, sorry, that doesn't turn into a building. And, and I think it's a metaphor, because it is about not spending money on little things that really don't add up. Having a real goal of big things you want in your life, thinking big so that you can then sacrifice and save that money for those big things that will make you money while you sleep. And for me, this, Todd, that people, meet me and they think I have this really glamorous TV career. I run a network and I produced a lot of shows. And in the book, I've deconstructed my career for people. And they'll see that where I've really made all the money is that while I was making those TV shows and while I was running a network, I lived beneath my means tremendously. And I bought buildings that now provide me income. And the TV business is very up and down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you sell a show and it works and sometimes you don't. But over the long haul, what has made me self-made is that I am a landlord. And even in a bad year of my TV business or of anything else I do, the rent checks come in. And, a lot of my friends in the entertainment industry say, did you just make way more money than we did? And I say, no, you were taking, when we were young and we had these blips where we made a lot of money in small doses, you took incredible trips and you bought expensive cars and you kept moving to bigger houses, and I bought commercial real estate and rented it. And now when I'm older, I tell people when you're young and you want to go to Europe on $50 a day and you have to schlep, you can do it. Mm-hmm. At 50, you don't want to be schlepping. So when you need the money is not when you're 25, it's when you're 50. And so you really have to have a big vision for your life. And you can start it at any moment, but you have to, for a period of time, sacrifice. And that's why I say don't buy shoes, buy buildings.
Let's talk about the entrepreneurial mindset for a second and how it could and is valuable for the corporate world, to the managers who are listening and saying, well, I don't want all my employees going off and starting side gigs. I want them to focus on their work. Or to the employees who are going, I love my job. How is this going to help me? How is developing an entrepreneurial mindset going to help somebody grow within their own career?
I think that these times we live in demand cultivating an entrepreneurial mindset even in a corporation. I think that if you are not side hustling on the weekend, and you'll see that by going on Amazon or going on eBay or driving an Uber or Airbnb being a room in your house, or the multitudes of other things you can do in a shared economy, bringing that information back into your business, understanding customers, understanding what's going on the internet is valuable information that makes you a better employee. And without experimenting in these things, you're kind of operating with a limp.
Yeah.
You really are not living the life that most millennials are living and that most people around the world are living out of necessity. And those are your customers for whatever you do. And so that the understanding firsthand of a customer relationship is primordial, and it's essential in these times.
And I think about this because you're learning to understand budgets, you're learning to understand networking, you're learning to understand the customer relationship, all these things you talk about, which at work may not be any part of your role, but if you can understand it, it is going to help you.
Well, and the other thing is, you understand when, most of us are really victimized at work because we think somebody's doing something to us. When you engage the entrepreneurial muscle, when you engage the ownership mindset, even for an hour, you see your boss in a different light. You see that company in a different light. You almost feel sorry for them because you understand what they're going through as a company. You understand what your boss is going through. And I think I think it makes you a better employee.
Oh, I agree. Let's talk about your book again, where people can find it. Your book's title, I want to focus on that for a second. Selfmade, Becoming Empowered, Self-Reliant, and Rich in Every Way.
Yes.
How did you come up with the subtitle of that?
Well, it took a lot, but I realized that what I wanted to show is what is our goal. I talk a lot with women and certainly with men. What is the goal? We have to have a big goal to be able to get there. And I realized that if I really boiled down what my goal was in life was to be empowered. And I can't be empowered if I'm not self-reliant. And self-reliance ultimately leads me to having a rich life in every way. And a rich life in every way doesn't mean that you're a greedy person or that money is, the salvation of everything. It's not money that we're looking for just for the sake of money. It's money buys you the freedom to really live the life you want to live, and a well-rounded life that's rich in abundance, that's rich in family, that's rich in love, that's rich in learning. Todd, that I went back to school in my 40s because I could.
Yeah.
And I got to finish school. There was something on my bucket list, and I was able to do that. Rich is not, I don't go with the sort of that greed thing in America. I think a rich life is a life that gives you possibilities. And that is what empowerment through self-reliance creates for you.
Love that. Nely, you are always fantastic to talk to. You're one of the most grounded, large personalities I've ever met. And thank you
so much for saying that, because grounded is my favorite word. So I so appreciate that you say that.
Oh, I just love your philosophies. I love your stories, and I love. I haven't read the entire book yet, but I know I'm gonna love it. For listeners who want to learn more about you or learn about Selfmade, where can they find you? What's the best place?
Look, the easiest place to find the book, me, the stories, more information on the stories, please go to becomingselfmade.com. And you'll also find out that we have an app coming out as well, that there's a chapter in the book called The Hidden Money in America. And our app is a way to connect all of our readers with each other and help you find all that hidden money that you should go after.
Sweet. Thanks for being with us today, Nely.
What did you think of today's show? The conversation continues on www.octanner.com. Be sure to leave us a comment. Also, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to all our podcasts on iTunes. Now get out there and build something beautiful. It's your turn now.